Hello again, BookTube. I'm Jim, and this is my channel, Jim Reads Too Slow. I'm back for a recap of my reading for week 2 of New Worlds November, featuring robots and AI. Just to recap, New Worlds November was organized by the Bookish Bryants with a list of hosts that includes some of the best that BookTube has to offer. This inaugural event features shorter fiction, novellas to short stories, and I'm having a great time digging into some old classics as well as some newer stories. This week I read 8 stories. I'll start out with The Second Variety by Philip K. Dick. This story first appeared in the magazine Space Science Fiction in 1953. According to AmericanLiterature.com, it was adapted into a movie by the name of Screamers, and also it may have influenced the movie The Terminator. This is a war story. The United Nations forces are battling it out against the forces of the Soviet Union, and the war has pretty much destroyed the entire planet. The UN side, which has moved all of its government and industry to the moon, has introduced these little Soviet killing robots. Now these are manufactured in automated underground factories. But the robots have begun to improve on their original design. So now Philip K. Dick's theme that is ongoing in his stories, what is a robot, what is a human, makes one of its early appearances. The generation of robots that begin to appear in this story look human, they sound human, they act human. But their programming has been expanded, and it now includes all life, not just the Soviet soldiers. Asimov's three laws of robotics do not come into play in this story. It's pretty bleak, but it's well written, I think. The second story I read was The Machine Stops by E.M. Forster. Yep, that E.M. Forster. It first appeared in the Oxford and Cambridge Review in 1909. Now this is a story of the people of Earth live underground. Each individual has her own room. They don't believe that it's possible to live on the surface of the planet. Human society is described in a way that it makes it sound like an Earth-wide bee colony. The rooms are hexagonal, each is identical, and everything that anyone needs or wants is provided and delivered to them by the central computer or AI called the machine. Now, parts of this story may seem familiar because Forster anticipates the internet and social media, and in some respects fairly accurately. There's very little personal contact. In fact, it's frowned upon. There's very little travel. That's frowned upon also. Original ideas are frowned upon. The people just live out their days listening to and delivering pointless lectures that are all based on second and third-hand ideas. Excuse me. It's like a culture of stereotypical neckbeards living out their entire lives in their parents' basements. The people see themselves as growing more and more civilized, but in reality, they're just giving up their humanity. So into this setting steps Vashti, a woman who is perfectly satisfied with the way things are, and her son Kuno, who lives on the other side of the world, who is not satisfied with life under the machine. Now, Kuno has had an adventure involving escape to the surface of the earth, where he sees that there are indeed people up there, but he's captured and returned to the machine. He tells his mother all about this, what has happened to him, and she basically disowns him. While time goes by, people begin to openly worship the machine, and as they say, some other things happen, including what gives the story its title. Forster's story also is kind of bleak and sad. but unlike the Philip K. Dick story, at least it has some glimmer of hope for humanity. The third story is His Master's Voice by Randall Garrett, which appeared in Analog magazine in 1962. Now, in this story, Daniel Oak, who is a government secret agent, whose cover is Confidential Expediter, a guy who is hired to help people get things done. On a previous mission, it seems that Oak's voice was imprinted on the AI of a spaceship known as McGuire, to the point that he is the only person who can give orders that this ship will obey. Well, McGuire has begun interpreting his self-preservation programming in such a way that no one can even try to work the bugs out anymore. He's refusing to let technicians and scientists board him and to try to fix this issue, and even threatens to escape if any further attempts are made. So Oak agrees to work for the company that owns the ship, to travel to Ceres and meet up with the ship and a team of scientists and technicians who hope to get this situation fixed. Well, once on board, we find that there are other corporations who have planted spies in this team to disrupt things. Of course, in the course of all of this, Oak gets punched in the throat, which affects his voice, and now McGuire is not even listening to his orders. So the ship is underway at the time, and so since it refuses to obey anyone's orders, it will just continue speeding out of the solar system until it runs out of fuel. Unless Oak can figure out a way to get the ship to listen to his orders. Story number 4, The Tunnel Under the World by Frederick Pohl, who even I recognize as one of the big names of science fiction. This appeared in Galaxy magazine in 1955. Now, this story is about loud, obnoxious, ubiquitous advertising and the people who quite literally are trapped by it. Where do the robots and or AI come in? You'll have to read this one to find out, because if I tell you any more, it will spoil it. I knew nothing about this story before I read it, and I have to say that it's one of the most entertaining that I've read this month. I loved it. You know, to each his own, but there are twists and turns in this story that actually had me gasping. I cannot recommend this one highly enough. Number 5, my Larry Niven short story, Becalmed in Hell. Now, it's from his Tales of Known Space collection, and before that, it appeared in the July 1965 magazine of fantasy and science fiction. This story is about a mission to Venus. Howie is the astronaut, and Eric is the ship, specifically the brains of the ship. Now, since Eric is an actual human brain and nervous system, the story technically would involve a cyborg rather than a robot or artificial intelligence. But there's no romance or sex involved, so the story centers on the interactions between Howie and Eric when Eric suddenly loses all sensation of his propulsion system. And they're stranded in this super hot, high pressure atmosphere. They each attempt to figure out what the problem is. Is it something mechanical? Is it psychosomatic? It's a good story. My 6th story was Philly Killed His Car by Will McIntosh. Now, it appears in the July and August issue of Asimov's magazine, the same magazine from which I read last week's Out of the Box by J. O'Connell, which is totally an AI story. I should have saved that one for this week. But anyway, Philly Killed His Car is about an AI world run amok in a way that's suited to a Steve Donahue rant. As a kid, I anthropomorphized inanimate objects around the house, and this story took me back to that. Each piece of machinery, each appliance, every device that people use is a person. From the mechanical lifts in the main character Philly's boots, to his smartphone, to his father-in-law's toaster. All are intelligent, all are self-aware, each has its own personality, and more often than not speaks with its own literal voice. And they all communicate with one another as well. They also name themselves. So the toaster is Eric. The phone, of course, is Superphone. The boot lifts are Eldritch, etc. Well, in the story, all Philly wants to do is sell his money pit super expensive car that he's inherited from an aunt. It's draining his and his wife's finances. They're about to have a baby, and they need the money. But the car, Madeline, who by the way is not a very nice person, does not want to be sold. And so she thwarts all of Philly's attempts. So what to do? Well, over a few beers, Philly and his buddy Gibbsy work out a plan. And I'll leave it at that. I like this story. It's very entertaining. One more. The two remaining stories I read both on Thursday in honor of Kurt Vonnegut's birthday. So they don't have anything to do with robots or AI. They were just the easiest ones that I could find because somewhere along the way I lost my Vonnegut books, including his short story collections. The first story is called To Be or Not to Be, spelled 2BR02B, which first appeared in the Worlds of If magazine in 1962. Now this story is about a world where, in order to keep the population under control, for every person born, someone has to die. Now the story takes place in the hospital waiting room where an expectant father is waiting for his wife to deliver triplets. The Big Trip Yonder, the second Vonnegut story I read, first appeared in Galaxy magazine in 1954. In this world, the population is out of control because of a product called anti-gerasone, which halts the aging process. Now the Schwartz family, headed by Gramps, is made up of a few people over 20, all living together in an apartment in New York City. No one has any room at all of their own. They all struggle to stay in Gramps' good graces. So there are my stories for week 2 of New Worlds November. Week 3 features stories about time travel. I don't know how deeply I'm going to get into that. Maybe I'll read one or two, but I am behind in my other novellas that I intended to read for this month. So we'll see. I'll tell you about it next week. So until then, bye.